Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. Alright, so as you guys know probably by now, Wesley So has defeated Jordan van Foreest to make it to the semifinals. I believe it's semifinals, yeah, semi or quarterfinals. The next level, the next round. So we're trying to see who the remaining four are at this point. But Wesley So is one of them. So congrats to Wesley So. Looking forward to see like what the rest of the next couple of days looks like. So as always, for my people in the Philippines, I will say mabuhay to you. Mabuting pagbadi ingat lagi. Kamusta na aking mga kaibigan? Masaya akong makita kang muli. Appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. Anybody who is coming from the Netherlands or who does speak Dutch, I will say hello and thank you. Appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. And anybody else from around the world, thank you very much for stopping by. If you guys are ready to go, we shall take a look and see what this, it is. Man, I'm spacing. I don't know what round this is. Hold on. It's not round 2, game 2. It's like another game. Let me get this correct. Yes. Oh, so this is round 2, game 1. Okay. I knew that wasn't right. I need to fix my thumbnail. Okay, I'll have it fixed so you'll see that it looks right. But anyway, if you guys are ready to go, let's take a look and see what we have for this game. So we have e4, e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, and we have bishop to b5, so we have the Roy Lopez, and then we have the Roy Lopez, the Morphy defense, a6, just, you know, trying to evict the bishop, ask the bishop what does it want to do. So the bishop says, hey, I'm going to preserve myself and go back to a4. Knight comes to f6, we see castles. Of course, as you guys know, you're not going to be just winning a pawn if you take on e4, because, you're going to be looking at rook to e1, along with the bishop coming here, and you're going to be winning your own little bit of material and stuff like that. So bishop comes to e7, blocking that ability. So now we have to play d3 or rook to e1 comes, or knight to c3, just making sure that, we can defend that e4 pawn. We have b5 knocking the bishop back to b3. But we have to put in d6 first before we play knight to a5, because, knight takes e5 was on tap for white. So we do see c3, allowing the bishop to retreat once we do see knight to a5, which is what we're going to see. We've got castles by black. h3, stopping any bishop g4s or even knight to g4s, more like bishop g4s. We do have knight to a5, bishop comes back to c2. So that's a little bit better of a square for it to be on with the castle king, maybe possibly at some point attacking a7. We do have c5, and this is trying to make d4 a little bit undesirable, but, you're still going to push d4 anyway. So we have d4. Knight comes back to d7. We have d5 closing the position, which, this bishop is, it does make the bishop just a tad bit sad, because, you would like to have the bishop, attacking this pawn over here, but it's kind of blocked by its own pawn. So we have knight to b6, b3, because we have some really serious threats of plopping a knight down into c4, so we don't want that. So b3 comes, bishop comes to d7. We have bishop to e3, g6, knight b to d2. We have king down to g7, queen over to c1. At some point, we're hoping that we can get like a knight move somewhere, and then we have a nice little battery going on over here. Bam, bam. f5 comes. We have b4, pawn takes b4, pawn takes b4. We have knight back to b7, and then we have queen to b2. We're trying to see if maybe we can get something rolling against this king. It's never a bad idea. f4 closing the position down. So we do see bishop taking b6, queen taking b6. We have a4, right on the money. The position is fairly equal for each side. Both sides kind of have an equal type of space. They do have one pawn, kind of real deep into, the opponent's position. But, probably you can say that maybe white has a slight edge just because they have double knights. This is the type of structure that'll benefit double knights. Because as you guys can see, this bishop is actually really bad. Because it doesn't really have like some good diagonals. It would probably have to come back and do something like this. And, try to target that way. And this bishop, I mean, it doesn't have a lot of like, I mean, you see it can't come here. It really can't come anywhere here. So the bishops aren't really, you know, maximized like you might like. So we have g5. You know, our pawns on black side are pointing towards the king side. So this is going to be, you know, the way that you try to break the position open. And white is going to be playing usually more on the queen side with this structure pointing in this direction. So pawn takes b5, pawn takes b5. We have rook takes a8, rook takes a8. We have a knight down to h2. You know, really just trying to slow down, you know, this pawn storm that we have going on. We didn't castle on opposite sides, but anytime like you remove the knight from f6 and push to f5, you're either trying to break down the structure or you're going to be pushing, and then the g pawn is most likely going to be coming. So we have h5, just continuing, you know, putting the pressure on. And so we're trying to stop it with bishop to d1. You know, it's not going to be as favorable for you to push here because you're going to be taking, and you're going to be, you know, getting to trade off. You know, one of these bishops, you're going to have double knights, which is, you know, it's pretty beneficial, like I said, in this type of position. King comes to h6. You also were, you know, trying to attack the pawn on h5. Bishop comes to e2. We see rook to a4. You know, this is definitely like a pawn that we kind of have to babysit as white. So, you know, black's just trying to put a little bit of pressure on it. Queen comes to c3. We see bishop back to d8. Knight comes to b3. And we would kind of like, maybe if we can get like a knight in here and kind of trade off and give ourselves a pass pawn, that wouldn't be too horrible. Queen comes back to c7, offering a trade of queens. We got queen over to f3. Not only are we not wanting to trade, but we are trying to put a little bit of pressure on this pawn over here. But black actually can very easily defend with bishop to e8. So, you know, the position is actually pretty favorable for black. Like, once black can actually kind of get their pieces just on a little bit better squares, they do kind of like, they are on a little bit better of an attack than black is. You know, as you can see, you know, this black king is actually fairly safe. But, you know, white's pieces are kind of tied down, you know, to like defending like this pawn push situation going on. So they're not as active as you'd like for them to be. So the rook comes to c1, of course, getting a tempo on the queen. Why not? Queen comes over to a7 just to make sure that, you know, if the king sidesteps anywhere, we're just adding a little bit of, you know, more protection on this pawn over here. Rook comes to c6. So this is a really interesting move. You know, of course, we're hoping and we're praying that bishop takes on c6, and then we have pawn taking c6. And this is actually a really inconvenient situation for black to be in because, you know, you are threatening check here, and you also are threatening this this knight over here. So it's not the best. I mean, you're going to be taking the pawn here as well. So, you know, it's just looking really, really nice for white. But, you know, black is not interested in any of that. They're like, you know what, I'm not giving you all that. So Wesley so declines that and just goes ahead and plays the best move in the position. Rook takes b4. We see knight to c5. It's a little, it's kind of nifty. It's kind of cute. I mean, you know, because this pawn is pinned to this king. So, I mean, it's pretty much a free square for the knight to go to. So we have rook to b1 with check. And then we have knight back to f1. Of course, the king couldn't move. And then we actually see g4. Now, instead of g4, it's actually really nice for black to actually take on c5. And it is severely undesirable for the knight to for the rook to take here. So we're going to be taking the pawn on d6, and the bishop actually would go to f6 to block the check. Rook would take on f6, king up to g7, rook to b6, and then queen takes e4. And this is actually a really crazy variation. This is just literally everything the computer said. That's how we need to roll. But as you can see, you know, not only is like white kind of jumbled up here and they're pinned, you know, they are down an entire pawn. So this is actually very favorable for black to be in. So like I said, after knight to f1, we do see g4. Pawn takes g4. Bishop takes c6. We have g5 check, which is taking advantage of the fact that, you know, like I said, you have this check situation going on, and it's going to be forcing black back. You know, also you definitely don't want to go into a situation like this where, you know, you have one of these checks going on, especially because, I mean, this is on pre, this is about to be on, like, everything is bad. So we don't have that. So g5, we actually see king takes g5, and now we have knight to e6. And the king has to find an exact path to go to. Of course, you're not going to be doing this because this is just checkmate. You're not going to be coming back here because this is also checkmate. So we can rule those moves out. So it's basically between f6 and g6. And g6 is actually pretty bad because you're going to be looking at pawn takes c6, and you are deflecting this knight away from protecting this bishop. So, you know, the tide has just completely turned into white's favor. So literally the only move is actually king to f6, because with your bishop being on a pre, you're going to be taking that bishop with the pawn that does support this knight. So it's not going to be as beneficial of a capture because, you know, if you were to, go pawn takes c6, king would take on e6, and then after pawn takes b7, you actually have queen takes b7, and you are just down 2 entire pawns. Not only that, but you're down in exchange as well. And I mean, your pieces still look really clumped and like kind of ugly. So that's not where we want to go. So let me get back to where we have. So the king comes to f6. We see queen over to h3, just making sure that we protect that knight. But that does allow the bishop to come on to d7. We see queen to h4 with check. King comes to g6. We have knight takes d8, and then queen takes d8. And I mean, everything is fairly equal. Black does have an extra pawn, and they do have the exchange. So, I mean, they're doing actually considerably better than white is. We see queen to f7. And these are just very accurate, like, defensive moves that Wesley So is making, because this was the top move. And it just makes sure that you aren't subject to really any checks. You know, just making sure that you defend. So you always have to make sure when you're playing your games and stuff, you know, like, don't always just think, like, attack. Like, sometimes you have to, like, step back and say, okay, am I good? Like, let me go ahead and, like, you know, make sure that I'm defended enough, and then you can start trying to move a little bit forward. So queen comes to h8, the bishop comes down to g4, and this is actually a really, really annoying move because the bishop doesn't really have anywhere to go. Well, I mean, the bishop does have somewhere to go. I mean, it's like right here, but I mean, you know, you're going to be looking at, you know, it's just nastiness, you know. So we are pretty much forced to trade on g4. Pawn takes g4, but as you guys can see, we have 2 nice passed pawns that are going to be trying to push their way forward. Queen comes to d8. We got g3. Queen takes d6 with check. Queen comes to f6. We do not want to trade in this position at all. So the queen comes back to d7. Rook comes to c1. We see queen to g4 with check. King goes to h6. We see d6. And this, unfortunately, actually just throws a pawn away. Because we do see pawn takes f2 with check. King takes f2. And then queen takes d6. And so we are down a pawn and an exchange, which has pretty much been the case for a while. So we have queen to h4 with check. King comes to g6. Queen comes to g4. Of course, we would like to go back and forth and just get a draw and like shake hands and go home. But that's, or not shake hands because this is online. But, you know, just shake virtual hands and go home. But we're not going to have that. King comes to f7. Queen comes to h5 with check. King comes to e7. We see queen to h7 with check. King comes to d8. And then we do have queen to b7. And before I get into what was finally played in the game, if you want to go ahead and pause the video and guess the mate in 3, there's a key move that makes it a mate in 3. Go ahead and do so real quick. Okay, cool. So when you guys like do tactics puzzles, or when you're in your position, like you're always taught to, or you always learn at least to like look for checks first. So of course we see queen to c5 with check, and we see queen to d4 with check, and they might seem very similar. If you guess queen to c5, this is actually what was played in the game, and it is actually right here that then Foreest does resign the game. So that is actually like still a gigantically killer move, but there is a mate in 3. This is like, when you get into this position, you actually kind of have a way that you can kind of wiggle out and buy yourself some time. You're still going to lose, but I mean, you're at least going to survive for a little bit longer, because after queen to c5 with check, you know, you'd see king to f3 trying to run away. The rook would take on f1 with check. King would go to g4. As you guys can see, I mean, you've kind of wiggled a little bit. I mean, you're not getting mated immediately, but like I said, there is a mate in 3 in the position. So after queen to b7, if you guess queen to d4, you would be absolutely correct. It is a mate in 3, and there's 2 different ways to get mated in 3. Of course, there is king to f3. and then there is king to e2. And those are the only moves that you can make that make any sense, because of course, you know, knight taking knight to d3, knight to e3 blocking the check is just going to result in just mate in 2. So if we go king to f5, queen would come down to d1 with check, king would come down to f2 only move, and then we'd see queen to f1 with checkmate. And the other one basically starts with a different move, but you end up in the same position. So after queen to d4, if you did go king to e2, you know, you would ultimately end up in the same position. Queen to d1 with check, and then king would come to f2, and then queen to f1 with checkmate. As you guys can see, it's the same exact thing. So back here, after queen to b7, if you did guess queen to d4, then great. You did a good job. You found the mate in 3. Like I said, I mean, before with even queen to c5, which is what we saw in the game, that's just insanely completely winning as well. So I mean, there really wasn't a wrong answer, but you know, the computer is always going to have, like, you know, the top move be like the most direct mate. It wants to like mate you like immediately if it can. So queen to d4, queen to c5, a waiting move. I mean, you literally can waste the tempo in this position if you want to, like, just because. This pawn is probably going to be promoting at some point. So you're going to have 2 queens and a rook. It's just not pretty. So it's nice. You know, Jordan Van Foreest did kind of get in there and get him, like, you know, I think a win or 2 during the thing. But Wesley, so, you know, was just able to kind of, you know, just get on top. So, you know, like I said, he is going to the semifinals or the quarterfinals. I'm not sure what the next round is called. But I appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. To keep my video under 17 minutes, I'm going to go ahead and not do the good mornings, but I will get them hopefully next video, whenever that may be. But maraming salamat po sa nanonood ng aking my video, aking mga kaibigan. Appreciate you guys very much. Thank you for anybody from the Netherlands. Makita tayo mamaya, and paalam to my people in the Philippines. I'll see you next time.